We're back, and this week we're talking skin health. If you tuned in last week, Olivia and I got into it about my blood panel, which we're going to revisit at some point. I have a lot more biomarkers to ask her about, and I've been asking her about a bunch since we last spoke. But before we left it off, we talked a little bit about skin health. Olivia, I think you had a client you were referring to who their skin was kind of breaking out, and you did a lot of testing with them to figure that out. So, my
Mhm.
first question for you on skin health, being that you're a functional nutritionist, is how correlated are these things? I think a lot of people think skin health starts and stops with what you
Mhm.
put on your face.
Absolutely, yeah. That's like
So,
one of the biggest consensus, and there's so much more to it than that.
yeah, so dive into that. Tell us about like what nutritional,
Mhm.
steps somebody might take to clear up their skin or maybe give both sides of it. Talk about like what a good skin healthy diet looks like and maybe
Yeah,
talk about what, the bad things for skin are as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to it for sure, and this is something that's like a big part of my personal story because for so long I struggled with acne so bad in my early
Mm.
20s, and it took me forever to figure out exactly what was going on. But of course, you go to the dermatologist, they recommend birth control, spironolactone, they recommend Accutane, or they recommend like topical antibiotics. And it's like none of these things address the root cause or work long term. And
Right.
it's not, I mean, it is an aesthetic problem, yes, but more than that, it's a health problem. If your skin is breaking out with acne or eczema, it's a signal that something deeper is going on.
Mm.
It's not something to be ignored, and it's not something that can be treated really with, especially long term, with topical products.
Mm.
And so, what I've seen in my practice and in healing myself, a lot of issues with inflammatory skin conditions like chronic acne, breakouts, and eczema, and even things like psoriasis, rosacea, a lot of these things. And again, it's multifactorial, but what I've seen probably the common denominator in most of my clients is imbalanced gut health.
Mm.
And I know this is something that I harp on all the time, and I'm always talking about the health and integrity of the microbiome, but it plays such a big role in skin health. The
Yeah.
biggest thing that I see, and the test that I run in my practice is called the GI map, and with that, we get dozens and dozens of different biomarkers. But there's some common threads I tend to see in my clients specifically that experience chronic acne. And so, one of the biggest things would be an overgrowth of inflammatory bacteria.
Mm.
So, that's what we would consider to be called dysbiosis. So, it's an imbalance of good to bad bacteria in our gut. And people with acne tend to have an overgrowth of this inflammatory dysbiotic bacteria that can impair nutrient absorption. It can lead to inflammation. It can lead to a whole host of things, like, indigestion. It can lead to gut issues itself, but I tend to see a lot of, again, my clients experience, those that have acne, they tend to have a lot of overgrowth of this bacteria. H. pylori is another big thing that I tend to see in the GI map with my clients that have acne. They tend to have H. pylori infections. Candida is another thing that I tend to see, like fungal overgrowth in the gut. That's another thing that can lead to acne breakouts. One major thing I see as well that a lot of practitioners miss and a lot of people don't think about is leaky gut,
Mm.
intestinal hyperpermeability. And so the marker that we get with the GI map, it's called secretory IgA, SIGA is the abbreviation. And when that's low, basically what that tells us, and again, this is the reading we get with the GI map, but when that SIGA is low on the GI map, it tends to indicate that your mucosal layer at your gut, so we all have like a thick layer of mucus. Cute, I know. We all have a thick layer of mucus that lines our gut, and this is protective. So this is basically what makes up the majority of our immune system within our microbiome. So they say like 60 to 80% of our immune system is found within our microbiome. And we can assess that with that secretory IgA reading that we get with the GI map. So again, if it's low, that tells me that that mucosal barrier is very thin or basically non-existent, which can lead to intestinal hyperpermeability or what's better known as leaky gut. So
Mm.
that's when like bacteria, antigens that are within the microbiome, they can basically make their way into the bloodstream and contribute to like an immune reaction. But also when we have that low mucosal barrier, that mucus is basically like protection for the
Mm.
rest of our body. It plays a really big role in our immune system. And so when it's low, we're more susceptible to developing like like bacterial pathogens or contracting things like parasites or any pathogen really, including the bacteria that can lead to acne.
There's a
So that's
whole,
one
yeah,
thing I see a lot.
there's a whole lot of questions there, so I'm going to try and ask them in succession here.
Okay.
Um, the first one would be, I think a lot of people listening to that are probably really intrigued, but also might be I guess, hesitant to go the GI map route. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, I think obviously, just given the argument you stated, I'd love to go that route if I was experiencing that type of inflammation. But taking it back a few steps, if somebody were to go get a comprehensive panel, but not a GI map test,
Mhm.
more comprehensive than mine last week, but not as comprehensive as the GI map. Are there biomarkers on a comprehensive panel that might also correlate with, that level of inflammation? Could you see that on a regular blood test too, and maybe have some inklings that there might be
Yeah.
some inflammation there?
Definitely. We can get the secretory IgA reading in the blood work too.
Hmm.
I prefer, I mean, I start in my packages, my first tier one package, I start with the blood work and the GI map.
Yeah.
I prefer for acne to really look at like what's going on in the microbiome because in my experience, that's the most fruitful thing to do in
Yeah.
terms of healing the skin. But yeah, I mean, the root of acne breakouts is so multifactorial. There could be so many factors involved in breakouts. So what we could potentially see in blood work in like a comprehensive panel, like what we went over last week, would be blood sugar imbalances. That's a big one that can lead to hormonal acne breakouts, especially like around the jaw and the
Hmm.
chin area. So we'd want to look at the hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker of blood sugar balance over 3 months. We'd want to look at the fasting glucose. We'd want to look at insulin. We'd want to look at the hormones too. So estradiol, which is the main most biologically active form of estrogen. Estrogen dominance is something that can oftentimes lead to acne breakouts. And there's a lot with that story because estrogen fluctuates throughout the month, and of course, there's many different ways to assess if like we're properly detoxing estrogen and methylating. Like, there's so much to that. But we'd also want to look at androgens like DHEA and testosterone. Those things, as we know, can play a really big role in contributing to acne breakouts. Um, what else? I would say those would be the biggest things.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, I lied. Sometimes I see high ferritin. I
Hmm.
think we've talked about this at some point. So ferritin is that
Yeah.
marker of iron storage. Typically, I see it low,
Right.
especially in people who are like experiencing chronic fatigue and anxiety. But when it's too high, it's not a good thing either because iron gets stored in the liver, and when it's elevated, then it becomes an inflammatory marker. And that's an indication that we need to work on like nurturing the liver.
If we are looking at all these things and noticing these issues, I kind of want to expand on that a little bit. I'm curious as to how you mentioned that the hormonal breakouts happen in certain areas of the face, like you said, the jaw specifically.
Mhm.
Is that something that is from a just looking at someone at their face, or maybe let's say you have like a look at somebody's torso or their bare chest or something, and you see acne in different parts of their body. Is it able, are you kind of able to maybe deduce just from looking at, like, I'm very intrigued by the fact that like certain
Mhm.
hormonal breakouts can only happen on your jaw or things like that.
Yeah.
Is that a tell ever, like where the acne is as to the level of inflammation, or not really?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think most of this really, based on my experience, is like just anecdotal observation. There is in traditional Chinese medicine, and I'm not a TCM practitioner, but I know in traditional Chinese medicine, they have the concept of like face mapping.
Hmm.
So if you have acne breakouts or, fine lines and wrinkles or like other inflammatory skin conditions in certain areas of your face, then they associate that with different organs and different emotions and maybe even like like different times of the day because they use the circadian clock a lot
Oh,
to determine different health conditions. But in my experience, I mean, I've seen the face map and they say like issues with acne here, like specifically like right where the like sort of like diagonal
mhm.
from your
or what's the
mouth, like your
word?
chin.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, they say that's associated with the large intestines. And I've seen a lot of clients that tend to have like the breakouts here do experience some issues with constipation or bloating, or just slow motility and digestion overall. But for me to say, like, can I look at somebody and see where their acne is and then sort of deduce where it's coming from? In my experience, no, because again, it's so variable. There's so many different things that can be helpful for acne or that can contribute to acne. But it's a really good question and it's a really interesting conversation and topic.
Yeah.
And if you speak to like a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, they might have something different to say.
Yeah.
But I know for sure they do use that face mapping.
You got me wanting to have one on an episode with us just to talk about that because I'm
Yeah, it'd be cool.
thinking back to the only time I ever got acupuncture once. It was great, by the way.
Yeah.
But I got acupuncture once a long time ago, um, maybe not long after college because I was having some lower back issues.
Mm,
Probably most likely from lifting too much. But what was really interesting was the organ connection
mm,
that they put together. The
mm.
woman, the practitioner who inserted the needles, was telling me about how she was going to put them in my low back, but not for my low back. She was like, this is also where your kidneys are. And your
Yeah.
kidneys, might be a little inflamed, and that might have something to do. And it's crazy to me because now I think about what she said that day. And we were talking last week about how, my kidneys and hydration need a little bit of work. And maybe that was even more of a problem back then.
Yeah.
It's just kind of wild to
Maybe.
think about. So,
There's so many different, not to interrupt your train of thought, but like it's so fascinating to me because there's so many different forms of medicine.
yeah.
There's something called, I don't know if you're familiar with, and this is totally off topic, I'm digressing, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of eight constitution medicine. It's a Korean thing,
No.
founded by this Korean doctor like years and years ago. And it's basically like you answer a bunch of questions. It's kind of how they use in TCM, where they talk about your, or no, sorry, that's Ayurveda, which is like the old Indian medicinal system,
Yeah.
that integrates yoga. And they talk about like your doshas and your constitutions. This eight constitution medicine is like kind of similar. And they
Okay.
say you can't eat this. And then they give you different organs that are like, okay, well, this organ system is the strongest and this one is the weakest. What brought this to mind when you mentioned the kidneys is I did the questionnaire to figure out like what my constitution was within this framework. And I think they said the kidneys or my kidneys were like my strongest organs,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which is
Cool.
interesting. Totally off topic, but look it
Yeah, I
up
mean,
later if
maybe
you're
maybe it
interested.
is, maybe it isn't. I think there's some relevance to it because if anybody listening is like kind of teetering on the side of trying Chinese medicine, I can say from my one experience, it was really good. So,
Yeah,
and it seems like
fascinating.
you have some shared philosophies with it. So I think that's really cool. Let's
Mhm.
go back though to your client or maybe your clients, if you kind of want to talk about their experience.
Mhm.
Rewind back to what we were talking about last week and tell me about the process in which you helped that one client who had some inflammation, had some acne,
Mhm.
and maybe they're not fully cured now, but how you kind of went about treating it after the
Yeah.
GI map test.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I had one client recently and we worked together, I think, for about 5 or 6 months. And I posted this on my Instagram story, but she texted me like 2 months after our work together. And I mean, she was really, really struggling. Like she had full on cysts, like all on her cheeks. Like
Mm.
I'm actually friends with her sister-in-law, and her sister-in-law was telling me there was one point where you would like press a point on her skin and like a pustule would start like bleeding and
Oh
pus,
man.
like just to give you an idea of how bad her acne was. And she had been
Wow.
dealing with this for a decade. And she texted me and she's like, my skin has not been this clear since I was 17 years old. Like, you're a miracle worker. I'm like, I
Wow.
can't even believe this.
Yeah, yeah.
So we actually didn't do, there's been a couple clients, or one in particular I'm thinking of, where we did like tons and tons of testing. And the GI map and the gut healing really helped, but like we worked deeper on detoxification. But with this client I'm referring to in particular, we did the GI map. What we found in her gut, we didn't do any other testing aside from the GI map. And what we found was there was parasites. I think she had one or two parasites. She had like a bacterial pathogen. I think it was not C. diff, but one of the kind of like serious bacterial pathogens, but she wasn't symptomatic. She had an overgrowth of bacteria. I think she had H. pylori. She definitely had low enzymes. I think she definitely had the low immune function, the low secretory IgA. I don't think she had any fungal overgrowth or candida, but her gut was a mess, pretty
Mm,
much.
yeah.
So we worked on healing that a lot. There was a couple things we did with that data that we got. But before we went into that, there's typically a couple things I have clients work on with acne right away before doing any testing. I had her get started on cod liver oil right
Okay.
away,
Yep.
which is like one of my favorite remedies for acne. We think about what the strongest acne medication is on the market, Accutane. It's literally just like isolated vitamin A. It's a synthetic form, and of course, in like really high doses, because we think of Accutane as being really toxic, and it is. But it's isotretinoin, which is a synthetic form of vitamin A, but it's really helpful for healing acne. But of course, it's toxic when in such an elevated dose. But cod liver oil or any liver, it could be cod liver, it could be chicken liver, beef liver. This is like nature's multivitamin. There's so many vitamins and minerals within liver. Not everybody can stomach eating liver.
Yeah,
I've
for
tried
sure.
it. It's not the best tasting thing. Some people love it, some people don't. So typically, if that's not the case, like if they don't enjoy eating liver, I'll put them on cod liver oil, which is really high in preformed vitamin A. So it doesn't need to be converted into the usable, like most bioavailable form of vitamin A.
Mm,
So I have them get started with that. I typically have them get started on really high quality electrolytes like Element or the Quinton isotonic electrolytes from Quicksilver.
yep.
These are the ones that they're extracted from a phytoplankton bloom that are like, it's like miles below the ocean surface, and they're really, really high quality because
Yep.
what we see too a lot of times with acne breakouts is low minerals.
Mm,
So low magnesium, low potassium, low sodium. So I tend to get them started with the high quality electrolytes a couple times per day. I might even have them work in like a mineral mocktail with like coconut water, high quality sea salt, maybe some orange juice for vitamin C. Most people are low in minerals. I definitely have them get started with blood sugar balance too. So not eating any foods that's going to spike their blood sugar and spike their insulin as a result. So I tend to have them like lower carbohydrate intake. I might have them eat green vegetables at the start of their meals before they start with their protein, and then another, like if they are eating a starch, I typically have them eat that last. And that's because the fiber and the protein from the vegetables and whatever protein they're having tends to coat their stomach and their small intestines and allows for a slower absorption of the blood sugar and
Wow,
glucose.
cool.
Yeah. So I'll have them get started with that. Um, what else? Is there anything else I typically have them do? I might have them start on colostrum,
Mm, yeah.
something that can be really helpful because leaky gut tends, most people with acne tend to have leaky gut, and colostrum is something, it's full of immunoglobulins. It can really help boost that mucosal layer. But then when we do the testing, and what I had this client do in particular, when we saw all those like the parasites, the pathogens, first what we did is we worked on removing. So in functional medicine, we utilize a framework called the 5R protocol. This is typical for gut healing, and the first R is remove. So before we do anything else with the gut, we have to work on removing any pathogens or inflammatory bacteria or parasites or whatever it is before we do anything else. So we first worked on, we implemented a couple antimicrobial, like herbal supplements to help kill the bad bacteria. I believe I put her on enzymes right away too because her enzymes were low. We didn't address the parasites at this point. We did that as a second phase. But I had her get started also on S. boulardii as a part of that first phase, the Saccharomyces boulardii. It's a probiotic. Technically, it's a yeast, but it's a really high potency probiotic, and it actually helps to boost that mucosal layer. So it helps to boost that secretory IgA. So we got a head start on doing that within the first phase. And I think that lasted anywhere, I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks. I had her on that protocol, in addition to some of the lifestyle stuff I touched on previously. Um, and she started to see a lot of improvement. We weren't quite where we wanted to be in terms of like clearing her skin, but we did see a lot of improvement with that.
Yep.
And then after that, we worked on the parasite cleanse. So I actually work with this company called Cellcore, and they have an amazing parasite cleanse that you do during the full moon. because actually your immune system is like lower during the full moon because of
Wow.
like melatonin decrease and serotonin increase
Hmm.
during that time. It's really fascinating and it sounds super woo-woo, but it's not. It's actually based in science.
Sure. Yeah.
So I believe I had her do yeah, that cleanse for the parasites. So that's a blend of like antimicrobial, or not antimicrobial, anti-parasitic herbs along with different binders. And then as a part of the last phase, which lasted about 3 months, that's when we did a lot of deep therapies on like boosting that mucosal layer. I had her work in a really high quality probiotic, a spore-based probiotic that can survive the stomach acid. It's one called Megaspore that I really love. It has antioxidant activity in the gut too, so it's really good for like re-inoculating your microbiome with a diverse range of bacteria, but also lowering inflammation in the gut. Simultaneously, which is great. I think we worked in, yeah, some bovine immunoglobulin, so like some powdered IgG, IgE to help again boost that mucosal layer. And that last phase tends to run for like 3 months
Uh,
because we really need time to like again re-inoculate the system, boost that mucosal layer. And I think that's when she saw most of the change and the improvement. Of course, again, we did see some improvement with like getting rid of the bad, but the last phase when we were really working on strengthening her immune function, adding in the probiotics and the enzymes, I think that's when we really started to see it completely clear.
you answered my question right just then about timeline, because I imagine it's not a quick fix, as most things in health usually aren't. Like I wouldn't imagine
Yeah,
you saw immediate drastic improvements right away. So yeah, a couple months, like it's definitely one of those things that takes patience like anything else.
yeah.
And it seems like supplements are a big part of it. I recognize a lot of those supplement names.
Mhm.
I'm sure obviously just eating a generally cleaner diet, of course, helps, because I don't think it's too much of a mystery to anybody listening that hyper processed foods are not going to be good for your skin. Uh,
Yeah.
but another supplement that I didn't hear you mention, but I'm sure I wonder if it has a place in your rotation or something you've kind of done some research on is collagen. Does collagen fit into that process anywhere?
Yeah, in my experience, collagen doesn't make the biggest difference, but it is something that can be helpful for nurturing that mucosal layer at the gut lining,
Hmm.
like I've been talking about. It just doesn't make the most, in my experience, again, doesn't have the most benefit, so I
Hmm.
don't tend to use it. It's
Yeah,
innocuous; it's not going to harm anyone for the most part.
right.
So it can be maybe slightly helpful, but I've seen more improvement with things like L-glutamine and immunoglobulins and colostrum, like really high dose colostrum.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, I'm particularly interested at just how well how long the process took, because I know you said it took a few months before it really turned a corner. Um,
Mhm.
what are, would you say, I guess my follow-up question to that is, this is a one of one client, or have you had other situations where this has been applicable? I guess the question I would like to ask, if you know the answer to it, maybe you don't, is are these remedies that you've worked on with this client
Mhm.
foolproof? Like could anybody
Mhm.
theoretically try them and see some improvement? Maybe not the same level as your client, but
Yeah,
is it fair to say that they are pretty across the board helpful?
I would say yes for what I'm referring to in particular, but you don't just want to throw random supplements at a skin problem because it
Right.
may not be that you have an overgrowth of bacteria or you have leaky gut. And you don't also, I mean, that can be a waste of money. So I
Mhm.
would definitely recommend working with a practitioner and doing something like an advanced test like the GI map to see specifically what you need. But yeah, if somebody has an overgrowth of bacteria, there's a specific product I use. It's really like comprehensive. It has a lot of antimicrobial herbs. I've seen a lot of success with this product in many of my clients. Yeah, Espillarti, the immunoglobulins to help nurture the gut lining. Yeah, a lot of those things across the board are helpful for those specific imbalances, but I always recommend testing. You don't want to just throw these supplements out if you don't know what you're using them for.
Just as a confirmation, because a lot of this, I think the central theme is that a lot of this starts in the gut, if not all of it. There
Mhm.
is no real topical route you'll take, or has it come to a head, or have you even considered that's just not something you would do?
Yeah.
Like in supplementation, I'm not saying that in substitution, but would you also add some
Mm.
sort of, I don't know, topical, like shea butter. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other things that somebody might incorporate, but it would all just take place in the gut, you think?
Maybe it's controversial. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not an esthetician,
Yeah.
but I have not seen topicals make a massive difference in acne in my clients, in myself. I just don't believe it really plays a big role. Honestly, I've seen the most success in deeply healing our physiology, our gut health, our blood sugar, our hormones. That is where I have seen the most success. If there's one thing I would recommend, it might be like a tretinoin, like a topical retinol to help with like reducing inflammation, reducing scarring. But as far as I'm concerned, topical products aren't going to make a massive difference. It's just been
No.
my experience.
That's good. That's good to know. I can say I probably feel the same way in my experience as well. So for anybody listening, don't necessarily need to go this route, but I may not have told you I took Accutane when I was a teenager.
Mm,
If I didn't, it was great. The side effects weren't so great, but I'm
mm,
glad I did it and got it over with when I was 18 and didn't have to do it as an adult.
mm,
But yeah, I remember before Accutane, it was, and I'm sure a lot of people went this way if they are our age or even older, Proactive. And Proactive, the
mm. Oh
commercials looked
yeah,
great, but the
that was a
product
big
itself
thing back
was
in the
was
day.
was not very good. So
Yeah.
I support that. I think that's all really valid, and I don't think there's any real reason to be I guess psyoped into the idea of using something topical when you could be changing stuff at the gut level. Um,
I
so
think things, sorry to interrupt you. I think
oh yeah.
things like microneedling and like things that help with the scarring, I think, obviously can make a huge difference. But for active breakouts, I don't like to recommend any topical product. I just don't see, I've never seen real benefit in using them.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I want to kind of bring this home by talking a little bit more about the steps that somebody would take, and this might be kind of a repeat of themes of what we've talked about previously, but the steps that somebody would take to prevent the breakout from even happening, because I don't think it's crazy to say that somebody who hasn't had acne or hasn't had a breakout in the past might see another one, right? Accutane, what the doctor told me with Accutane was like, oh, once you take this and go through your cycle, you'll never have acne again. And that's mostly true in that I don't have the same amount of like level of breakouts, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean I'm never like I've had a pimple pop up here and there every now and again since then. It's not a crazy rash or, psoriasis, eczema looking, but pimples still come and go. If somebody were to be extra hyper proactive about not letting that level of inflammation, not letting breakouts happen, what are the steps, in your opinion, that they would take to keep the gut microbiome and keep the mucosal layer intact?
Like to prevent just in general, to
Yeah,
prevent.
breakouts from happening. If they're not a case in that they have to go to you for the GI map testing, but just want to take care of themselves, how would they go about it?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about the gut barrier as one of the biggest, like intestinal hyperpermeability as being one of the biggest reasons for an acne breakout, there's a couple things that can really degrade that mucosal barrier. Some of them are obvious. Alcohol is a big one. Refined sugar is something that can really degrade that mucosal layer. Stress is huge. Cortisol does or can contribute to leaky gut
Hmm.
and intestinal hyperpermeability. Yeah, any kind of like refined wheat. Gluten is a big thing too. Not everybody is intolerant to gluten. Of course, I don't love to recommend people go crazy with the gluten, especially because a lot of gluten is sprayed with glyphosate, which we know is not healthy. But gluten does tend to degrade that mucosal barrier, so that's something I would recommend avoiding. And then eating a lot of like foods rich in amino acids. So the cells, actually, what that mucosal layer is called, or what the gut barrier is called the epithelial lining.
Hmm.
And so what those cells, those epithelial cells, feed on is amino acids, specifically glutamine, glycine. So eating a lot of really high quality, like protein rich foods, like grass-fed beef beef, liver, of course, as I mentioned, is really not only really good for acne for the vitamin A, but also like to nurture the gut lining. Vegetables, of course, we want to make sure we're eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, really, to make sure we're feeding the different classes of good bacteria in our gut. Bone broth can be really healing for the gut lining. Um, what else? Soluble fiber-rich foods, so things like chia seeds, chia seed pudding, lentils, okra, sweet potato, those kinds of things can be really nurturing for the gut lining. I would say those would be the biggest things, specifically for the gut lining. Of course, the vitamin A, making sure you're eating a lot of vitamin A rich foods if we're stepping outside of the gut lining conversation.
Yeah.
So if you can stomach liver, that is something I would recommend eating a couple times per week. Actually, there's a brand, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they're called The Force of Nature.
Okay.
They're found at Whole Foods, and they create this like blend of beef. It's called the Ancestral Blend, but they blend in different organ meats. I think it's like 3% of, they blend in liver, I think heart too, like different organ meats
Wow.
into the ground beef. So when you cook it, you can't necessarily taste it. And with these organs, and liver in particular, you don't need a whole lot of it to reap the benefit. You really only need, I would say, like 3 ounces per week of chicken liver to reap the benefit, like get enough of the vitamin A to help with acne.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, I just figured out something for my next grocery list because that's great. I feel like I've been thinking about this for a while. I see the benefits of liver, beef liver, chicken liver, all that stuff in a lot of different circles online. But then I also think to the like 1 or 2 times that my grandma, prepared liver for me as a kid, and I just spat it out right away. I mean, I also did that with broccoli as a kid, so maybe I'll try it again and maybe I'll like it. But
Mm.
um, yeah, that's definitely something I feel like I want to start incorporating. Not that I have any acne issues or anything like that, just to
Yeah, no,
start
you're just
incorporating. Especially knowing that it's such small amounts of it are all you need on a day-to-day basis. I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of any foods. First of all, I'm a big fan of that it's in Whole Foods and I can just
Yeah,
go get it right now and it's easily
literally nature's
accessible.
multivitamin. Yeah.
Like it's right over there and I can go grab it. I not that it's a bad thing to order it offline, but it's good to know that it's like readily available.
Mhm.
And just generally it's always good to know those foods that are very nutrient dense, but you only need a small serving. I'm thinking of in particular like Brazil nuts.
Oh
Um
yeah,
I have like
the
two or three,
selenium.
yeah, 2 or 3 a day, but they have so much selenium and I'm like, this is like 3,000% of my daily value. So this is great. So always good to know that, and I
Yeah,
think it's helpful for people listening to know that the stuff that you need, the stuff that Olivia's talking about, is not necessarily hard to get. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah, there's a
um,
lot of actionable things you can do right away without doing all the testing.
yeah. So, well, this is great. Thanks so much because I feel like it's a topic we're gonna have to come back to and definitely want to explore, even if it's maybe just us two talking about the traditional Chinese medicine piece, because I feel like that could be a really cool.
Fascinating. Yeah,
Um,
it's something that I've thought about studying on my own, like maybe doing a little certificate or something, because they have such a unique perspective on health and healing. And
yeah,
I really love, I mean, like all of these like centuries old medicinal systems like TCM and Ayurveda and like the Korean medical systems, like they intertwine everything, the human body with nature and with animals and with the time and like the seasons. And it just makes so much sense because we are a part of nature. Whereas I feel like in the Western world, we put our health in silos
yeah,
so much to the fact that like we have so many, you go to the primary care doctor and they're like, oh, you have an issue with your gut, go see the GI doctor. Oh, you have an issue with
yeah.
your hormones. Like literally everything is connected. So it just makes sense. And yeah, I would love to chat about that. I don't know much, but I want to learn more and I love chatting about it.
Yeah, if one of us can find a third party to join in on this conversation on
Yeah,
all in one week, I think that would be really cool. But
that'd be so fun. Yeah.
yeah. Well, either way, thanks so much for this, and we will see you guys next week.
Yeah.